Hello YouTube, Sidekick here in my trusty AV-8B Harrier. But today's video is not really about the Harrier, it's actually more really of a Mission Editor video. Today's video is about how to plan a pop-up attack. So what's a pop-up attack? Well, in brief, it's a form of ground attack that was pretty much the standard during much of the Cold War period from, say, the early 1960s until the 90s. I'm sure it's actually also still practiced by pilots today. The idea of the pop-up attack is to ingress at low altitude and avoid being detected by radar, and then when you're close enough to the target, pop up to a dive bombing altitude and perform the dive bombing attack. Of course, as soon as you pop up, you become vulnerable to anything that can see you, including short-range AAA in the target area, but also including any radar-guided SAMs that happen to be in range. Thus, getting the pop-up right means spending as little time as possible, not only popping up, but also the minimum of time in the dive over the target. So I've been thinking about it a bit since I read a book called For Heaven's Sake about Israeli F-4 Phantoms during the Yom Kippur War in 1973. And what I learned from that book was that the Israeli Air Force, not surprisingly, had a very particular way of performing the pop-up attack, which did not surprise me. But I did not know exactly what that method was until I read the book, or how they actually implemented it. And so the Israeli Air Force method was to pop up at 35 degrees, but also to expect to dive on the target at 35 degrees from about 10,000 feet, aiming to release the bombs at about 4,000 feet. So to achieve that, routes would be planned so that the approach to target would begin at an initial point that gave a straight run to a pull-up point. The F-4 navigator, the guy in back, would call the turn at the IP and then count the pilot down as they approached the pull-up. The pilot would pull up at 35 degrees, and both pilot and navigator would start looking for the target. If they did it right, it would be right where they expected it to be. The biggest danger was that if they pulled up too far from the target, and then they would end up having to do a fairly shallow glide bombing attack, which would expose them to fire for much longer than they had expected. So it was important to be pretty precise, and that's really where the navigators in the F-4 kind of earned their money. So I started thinking about ways to plan a pop-up attack in DCS using waypoints in the Mission Editor. To make it work, I needed to find a way first of locating the roll-in point, one that would give me the right dive angle, and then finding a pull-up point that would let me pull up so that I ended up at the roll-in point. And then finally, I'd need to back up and find a convenient IP to get everything lined up. So, of course, in order to do that, the first thing I had to do was calculate some distances. So I made a handy-dandy little Excel spreadsheet. And basically what I did was I told Excel what angle I wanted to climb at, the altitude that I wanted to roll in at, and the dive angle that I wanted to use to attack the target. And it then gave me a distance in either nautical miles or kilometers, the distance that the pull-up point would have to be from the roll-in point, and then how far away from the target the roll-in point would be, which I've called offset. So for the Israeli attack method, where you pull up at 35 degrees, roll in at 10K, and dive at 35 degrees, of course it's symmetric, and the distance from pull-up to roll-in is 4.4 kilometers, which is, of course, exactly the same distance that you need to offset the roll-in point from the target. And then I just tried a bunch of other different ones just to see, what it would look like if you wanted to do it slightly differently. But today we're going to use the top line in the chart, and basically that means that the number we need to remember is 2.4 nautical miles or 4.4 kilometers. Okay, so here we are in the DCS Mission Editor. The basic idea is that we're going to use the test range, and we're going to take off from Kobuleti. We're going to come out to the coast. We're going to fly up, descend to low altitude, and then we're going to fly in towards the target. And then we're going to pop up at the right point, and we're going to roll in and attack this target here from rolling in at 10,000 feet, trying to dive at a 35-degree angle. So I realized that what I could do is I could actually use zones to help me with this, because basically I need to pick a point that's 2.4 nautical miles, 4,400 meters from the target. Well, if I make a zone, let me just, I already have the zones made up. If I make a zone, let's say we call it pop-up 3510K, which just happens to be a zone, that is 4,400 meters. then this basically gives me a circle on screen. If I roll in anywhere on this circle, I will end up executing a 35-degree dive on the target point, so long as I roll in at 10,000 feet. So the next problem is, how do I arrive at 10,000 feet somewhere on the circumference of this circle? So, well, we just use a second zone to figure that out. Exactly the same size zone, 4,400 foot zone, or 4,500 meter zone, I'm sorry. And basically what I do is I put the center of that zone anywhere I want on the circumference of the roll-in zone. And basically this is going to be my roll-in point. And now, if I pull up at any point on the radius of, on the circumference of this circle, then if I pull up at 35 degrees, I will end up at the roll-in point at 10,000 feet. So I need to pick a pop-up point somewhere on this circle so I can arrive here at 10,000 feet, which will then give me a 35-degree dive to the target. So I just need those two zones, and again, I can place so long as I place the center of this zone on the target, and I place the center of this zone on the circumference of the roll-in zone, then I can basically plan my pop-up any way that I want to. So last but not least, let's just unhide the Harrier here. And I have the route already planned. So you can see what I'm going to do is take off from Coboletti. I'm going to turn at the, once we get over the coast, I'm going to fly to an IP. And the idea is the IP is set up so that it's a straight line that crosses, my course is a straight line that crosses the pull-up circle and ends at the roll-in point and then goes to the target. So basically, I just drew a straight line, and where the line from the IP to the roll-in point crosses the pull-up circle, this zone, I label that as another waypoint, and I call that pull-up, which will give me roll-in at the edge of the roll-in circle. So the plan is that I will take off from Coboletti. Once I get to the initial point, all I have to do is aim at my pull-up waypoint. When I reach the pull-up waypoint, I pull up to 35 degrees. That will take me to the roll-in point. And when I look to the left, I should be able to roll in on the target and end up diving in on it at 35 degrees. So that's the theory anyways. Let's see if we can put it in practice. Okay, here we are rolling out onto the runway at Coboletti. Not even going to bother stopping. We'll just roll right into a takeoff run here. So I'm sure everything is all lined up. Just give her some juice here. And get ourselves underway. Just about there. There we go. And we're off and we're up. Gear up and flaps to auto. Okay, so pretty simple flight plan, not going to take us very long to fly. And like I said, we're going to go out to the coast, then we're going to hang right and start looking for waypoint 2. Waypoint 2 is, you will remember, the initial point. Once we cross waypoint 2, we're going to want to line up very quickly on the pull-up point to make sure we're headed exactly in the right direction. And then it's just a matter of counting down to the pull-up point and pulling up and remembering to pull up at 35 degrees. As you can see, we are armed with Mark 82 bombs, 4 of them. Going to drop them all in one pass, and we're all fenced in. The only thing I need to remember to do is to enable the master arm. I need to remember to enable the master arm. Okay, so we're coming around the corner here. We're looking for waypoint 2, which is our initial point. Doesn't really matter how we approach waypoint 2. The important thing is to line up from waypoint 2 to the pull-up point, because that line has to go straight through the pull-up point to the roll-in point. So we want to turn very quickly at the IP. So when you're planning this, it's good not to have too big a turn at the IP, otherwise you may not be exactly lined up because it takes you a while to turn. But once we cross that initial point, we want to turn very rapidly to the pull-up point, and then it's just a matter of settling in and waiting until we get there, of course. Okay, so now we're altering course a little to the pull-up point, and now it's time to advance the throttle to maximum and to get low. So as low as you can and as fast as you can, and then it's just a matter of watching the distance count down. As well as impressing the neighbors with our low-level ingress skills. Okay, getting close now. Here comes the waypoint, and pull up. So try to get to that 35-degree pull-up. Hold it there. And then it's time pretty soon to start looking in. Got to make sure we're headed in the right direction. And then we want to start looking off to the left. There is the target, in fact, waiting for us to get to 10,000 feet. That's probably about right. And we'll roll in and line up on the target. Standard roll in and pull up. And our dive angle looks pretty good, so our roll in was pretty good. I get the CCIP pipper on screen, and guess what? I forgot to enable the master arm, so we're off dry. So, just to prove that you can, in fact, do this pretty much from anywhere, we'll go around and do it again. All we actually have to do, it's a good exercise, all we actually have to do is recycle to waypoint 2, which was our initial point. We can basically come at the initial point from any direction we want to, and that's why we set the IP up. You want to set the IP up far enough back from the pull-up point that you have time to get straightened out and fly straight at the pull-up point. So this is very similar, at least according to my reading, to the way the F-4 pilots in the Israeli Air Force would work. The difference is that we have a computer doing all of the navigation for us using INS and GPS. In 1973, it basically would have been a human being actually having to do all of that. And that's why it actually worked well with two people, because the guy in back would get the pilot to the initial point and then get turned on to a course, and they literally did it by picking a course from the initial point, and it was just course and distance. You get on the course, and then the guy in back would just count down the distance, and he literally would say 3, 2, 1, pull up. So that's pretty much what we're doing here, except we're of course letting the computer in the HUD give us those cues instead of having a guy in the back telling us what to do. Now this time we really do need to make sure that the master arm is on, which it is. So as you can see, I've just come out here wide. Again, I don't want to arrive at the initial point where I have to make too dramatic a turn, because then that will change my alignment on the pull-up point a little, because there's a limit to how quickly you can make a turn. So I'm coming out back this direction, but now I'm rounding around on about 3 nautical miles to the IP. I'll get it on screen here in a sec. There it is. So I'll have to make a little bit more of a turn than we did last time, but it shouldn't be too much of a problem. It seemed to work pretty well last time. We were diving at about 35 degrees when we had to pull off dry. Okay, so here comes the IP. Switch to the pull-up point as the waypoint. Turn on to it. There it is. Get lined up on it. The other thing to make sure when you do pull up is that you do want to pull up on the same course that you cross the pull-up point on. You don't want to cheat to either side. And here we go, 2 miles to go. And we're starting to pull up just a little bit before, so we're actually pulling up at the point. 3, 2, 1, there we go. Pull up, stay aimed at the roll-in point. Try to get up to 35 degrees, maybe a little beyond 35 degrees, because it took us a little while to actually get pulled up. It doesn't have to be exact here. We're not trying to get exactly the right numbers. We're just trying to make sure we're about the right distance from the target, so that we're doing a 35-degree attack rather than a 25-degree attack or a 50-degree attack. Standard roll in, pull back the power, look for the target. flight path vector to the target, pull it up past the target, and get the CCIP pipper right below it, and right there. Right, this time we actually managed to drop the bombs. Let's pull off here. And we'll see what the target impact tracking script has to say about our efforts. It looks like it was a good accurate drop. Let's just see what it says in terms of our dive angle, which is what I'm really interested in. We want to be somewhere around 35 degrees. If we are, that kind of validates the whole mission plan, which was actually the point of today. And look at that. We hit the target, we dropped at a dive angle of 35 degrees, and we dropped it pretty close to 4,000 feet. So that seems like a pretty good Israeli Air Force pop-up attack planned in the mission editor. So give that a try. Let me know how you do. For now, this is going to be Sidekick, signing off.